Rain slicks the wooden floor of the dojo, each droplet tapping against the roof in a rhythm that mirrors the warrior's restless heartbeat. He moves with speed and precision, strikes landing true, yet a subtle hesitation shadows every motion. Talent is evident, skill undeniable, but something deeper wavers. His mind is unanchored, and his spirit frays at the edges of pressure. Victory, when it comes, feels fleeting, hollow, as though the body can triumph while the self remains untested. The mentor enters silently, footsteps soft but resonant with authority. His presence is calm, focused, yet carries an unmistakable weight, like a stone submerged in water, invisible but grounding. The warrior pauses, aware of the scrutiny before even looking up. This is no ordinary teacher. This is a master of the Musashi System, a discipline that bends body, mind, and spirit into alignment, revealing weakness with ruthless clarity. Your strikes are fast, but your mind is slow, the mentor observes, voice steady, cutting through the ambient patter of rain. Speed, without awareness, is a blade swinging blindly. Discipline is not punishment. It is the refinement of the self. Strength is useless if the mind cannot command it, if the spirit cannot endure it. The warrior bristles. Ego flares. He has trained for years, endured pain, proven himself in countless matches. Yet under the mentor's gaze, he feels the fragile tremor of inadequacy. Doubt creeps in. Perhaps there is a depth to mastery he has never approached. Perhaps victories he has counted are illusions, ephemeral and incomplete. Fear whispers, subtle yet persistent. The fear of exposure, of failure, of confronting limitations he has long ignored. The mentor motions to a practice sword, worn but meticulously maintained. Pick this up, strike, move, but do not fight me. Fight yourself. Every hesitation, every misalignment, every impulse to dominate rather than observe. These are your true opponents. You will not conquer them with strength. Only discipline, awareness, and surrender can prevail. The warrior grips the hilt, feeling its weight, the coolness of the wood, the subtle balance tuned over centuries. Each movement becomes a dialogue with himself. Missteps, once dismissed, are now glaring indicators of imbalance. Every strike teaches more than technique. It reveals impatience, ego, distraction. The rain outside is mirrored in the turmoil within, a constant rhythm, an unyielding reflection of the warrior's inner state. Hours pass. Sweat mixes with rain. Muscles ache. But the real work is not physical. Awareness sharpens with every repetition, every deliberate breath. He begins to notice the subtle signals. Tension in shoulders betraying fear. Hesitation in footwork revealing doubt. Breath patterns that betray ego's dominance. The Musashi System demands integration, not superficial mastery. Talent is insufficient. Presence and discipline are required to bridge the gap between potential and realization. By nightfall, the warrior sits on the damp floor, body exhausted, but mind alert, eyes tracing the patterns of water sliding across polished wood. The mentor kneels beside him, silent for a long moment, then speaks. Skill without self-mastery is like a blade without steel, beautiful yet brittle. Strength without discipline is a house without foundation. You have much to learn and little time to waste. The path begins now, not with your body, but with your attention, your endurance, your surrender. Transition toward part 2. The first step has been taken. The warrior has seen the mirror of his own inadequacy and the gap between raw ability and true mastery. The next challenge will test his mind and spirit in the quiet forge of disciplined repetition. Night deepens over the rain-slicked dojo, shadows stretching across the polished floor. The warrior rises once more, carrying the weight of the mentor's words, the reflection of his own limitations etched sharply into his mind. Exhaustion gnaws at his muscles, but the deeper struggle lies in his awareness, holding attention against the onslaught of ego, distraction, and subtle fear. Each breath must be deliberate, each movement conscious. Every strike must not only land, but align with intent and presence. The mentor observes without interruption, noting small but critical errors. A shoulder tensed too soon, a foot planted with hesitation, a gaze that seeks to dominate rather than perceive. Perfection is not a target, the mentor murmurs. It is the process of observing and refining without judgment. Every failure is feedback, every misstep a guide. Discipline is the bridge between talent and mastery. Hours blur into relentless repetition. Rain drums steadily on the roof, a metronome for body and mind. The warrior begins to notice subtle rhythms in his own movements, the ebb and flow of balance, the interplay of breath and motion. Fatigue transforms into focus, irritation into observation. Each imperfection becomes a lesson rather than a failure. Awareness deepens, stretching the boundaries of endurance and patience. Ego surfaces repeatedly, whispering for shortcuts, recognition, or validation. Yet now, the warrior intercepts these impulses, tracing them, acknowledging them, and returning to deliberate action. Fear, once vague and creeping, now appears clearly as a signal, alerting him to weakness, impatience, or distraction. The Musashi System reveals its paradox. Only by surrendering desire and observation of self can true strength emerge. By the pre-dawn hours, a subtle transformation takes root. The warrior feels tension ease in the shoulders, clarity sharpen in the mind, and steadiness settle in the spirit. His strikes, once merely fast, now flow with precision tempered by awareness. He has begun to glimpse the truth, that talent alone is a fragile weapon, and that mastery is forged in the silent labor of disciplined attention, sustained effort, and honest confrontation with one's own weaknesses. The mentor finally steps forward, voice calm but firm. Tonight, you have begun to see that mastery is not about defeating others. It is about commanding yourself. The path ahead is unyielding, and it demands more than skill. It demands endurance of body, clarity of mind, and strength of spirit. The next stage awaits, where repetition and silence will temper presence into power. Transition to Chapter 2. The warrior has glimpsed the first threshold of mastery, the confrontation with self. Now begins the trial of silence and relentless practice, where the mind is sharpened like steel, and the spirit learns the subtle discipline that transforms weakness into strength. Dawn breaks over the quiet dojo, mist curling between bamboo stalks outside, each tendril a whisper of the world beyond. The warrior enters, body tense yet alert, aware that today begins a trial unlike any before. Silence. No conversation, no distraction, only breath, movement, and observation. The mentor's instructions are sparse. Actions must speak louder than words, presence must dominate over thought. Here, the mind becomes the battlefield, and monotony its crucible. The warrior begins with repetitive strikes, footwork practiced until it becomes both familiar and alien under heightened attention. Each motion demands awareness, the alignment of shoulders, the pivot of the hips, the arc of the blade. Mistakes are magnified by the absence of words. Correction comes from observation and subtle feedback rather than explanation. Fatigue sets in swiftly, not only in muscles, but in focus, as the mind resists stillness and craves distraction. Meditation punctuates the training, sitting cross-legged in silence as the breath becomes the sole anchor. Thoughts surge, regrets, doubts, fleeting desires, but the warrior learns to notice without judgment. The Musashi system emphasizes that mastery begins in monotony, a single, deliberate act repeated until the mind, body, and spirit merge. Pain, discomfort, and boredom are not punishments. They are instruments, shaping attention, cultivating patience, and revealing the subtle cracks where ego and fear reside. Hours stretch. The rhythm of practice, punctuated by silent meditation, begins to carve clarity into the warrior's consciousness. He notices hesitation where impatience once lurked, tension where pride had stiffened movements. Each repetition, once mechanical, now carries meaning. Every strike a dialogue with the self, every pivot a lesson in presence. The mind grows sharper as it sifts through distractions, learning to prioritize observation over reaction. Ego surfaces intermittently. It seeks recognition, speed, superiority, urging shortcuts or flashy technique. But under the mentor's gaze and the discipline of repetition, it becomes visible, tangible, a tool for refinement rather than a master to obey. Fear, too, emerges, subtle, persistent. The worry of inadequacy, the dread of failure, the temptation to flee from monotony. Yet the warrior discovers a paradox. By observing fear and ego without surrender, he begins to convert them into instruments of focus. By midday, the warrior feels a shift. Fatigue remains, but awareness deepens. Each breath, strike, and stance is deliberate. Silence is no longer emptiness. It is precision, a sharpening of presence. The monotony, once grating, becomes meditative, each motion refining mind, body, and spirit. Through repetition and observation, the Musashi system begins to reveal its principle. The smallest deliberate act, when executed with attention and patience, can forge clarity and mastery. Transition toward Part 2. The warrior has begun to see that silence and repetition are not constraints, but tools. The coming hours will test endurance, focus, and the ability to transform discomfort into presence, forging the first true glimmers of disciplined strength. The day deepens, and the warrior remains immersed in repetition and stillness. Movements that once relied on speed or power now demand attention to nuance. The subtle twist of the wrist, the placement of a foot, the flow of breath. Each repetition becomes a teacher, revealing not only flaws in technique, but fissures in mind and spirit. Monotony stretches the warrior's patience, forcing a confrontation with impatience, desire, and distraction. In this crucible, clarity is forged. Pain emerges as a companion. Muscles burn, joints ache, and fatigue threatens to erode focus. Yet the warrior endures. The Musashi system teaches that discomfort is neither enemy nor punishment. It is feedback, a signal that presence is faltering or alignment is compromised. He learns to welcome these sensations, observing them with calm attention, allowing them to refine rather than derail him. Silence amplifies internal whispers, doubt, pride, and the lure of shortcuts. The warrior notices these impulses arise automatically, the ego seeking recognition or comfort. Rather than resisting or suppressing them, he studies them, understanding their patterns and learning to redirect energy toward deliberate action. Each internal victory, attention reclaimed, breath measured, thought observed, is more powerful than any external triumph. Time loses its usual markers. The sun arcs silently across the sky. The rain ceases. The forest hums in quiet rhythm. Yet the warrior's world is contained in each deliberate act. Awareness sharpens. Eyes detect micro-shifts in balance. Muscles anticipate motion. The mind notices even the faintest distraction. Presence, once a fleeting ideal, becomes lived reality. Fear, once a creeping shadow, is now a subtle guide, signaling where attention is needed and where the mind risks wandering. By evening, the warrior experiences the first glimmers of transformation. Movements are precise without conscious thought. Strikes flow seamlessly, and mind, body, and spirit align in a rhythm of silent efficiency. He feels the weight of discipline as both challenge and gift. Monotony has honed focus, silence has clarified purpose, and repetitive effort has begun to instill endurance beyond the physical. The mentor finally speaks, his voice calm but resonant. You have begun to understand that mastery begins not with triumph, but with observation. Silence reveals weakness, repetition builds strength, and presence bridges the two. Continue along this path, and your mind and spirit will learn to endure what the body alone cannot sustain. Transition to Chapter 3. Having tasted the clarity of disciplined silence, the warrior is now prepared to face fear directly, the crucible that will test courage, presence, and resolve under relentless pressure. Night descends over the mountains, cloaking the dojo in shadow. The warrior stands alone, muscles coiled, senses alert. The mentor approaches, silent, carrying the weight of authority and expectation. Tonight, he says, voice low and unwavering, you will meet the adversary that has always shaped your life. Fear. Not as illusion, not as shadow, but as reality you must confront, embrace, and transform. The first test is subtle yet profound. The warrior must patrol the surrounding forest under darkness, navigating treacherous terrain while maintaining absolute awareness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch demands presence. Heart races, mind alerts to imagined threats. Fear rises, the primal instinct to flee, to protect, to shrink from the unknown. Yet the Musashi System teaches that courage is not the absence of fear, but deliberate action in its presence. Each step is measured, each movement intentional, each breath an anchor to the moment. Next comes combat against superior opponents. Trained warriors attack with speed, unpredictability, and precision. The warrior's body responds, but the mind must do more. Anticipate, observe, and act without hesitation. Missteps are costly. Pain arrives swiftly, bruises, muscle fatigue, exhaustion, but the true challenge is internal. Anxiety whispers, ego urges retreat, doubt seeks dominance. The warrior realizes that fear is a teacher, a signal highlighting weakness and revealing opportunity for growth. Hours pass and the trials escalate. Night-long vigilance, physical endurance challenges, and tests that simulate life and death urgency. Fear manifests differently in each trial, through exhaustion, uncertainty, and the pressure of immediate consequence. The warrior begins to notice patterns. Where fear once caused hesitation, now it signals a need for heightened awareness. Where panic threatened, presence steadies. The mind, once reactive, begins to anticipate, to integrate, to transform fear into focused energy. Observation becomes key. Every action, every reaction, every fleeting thought is studied. Ego attempts interference, pushing for dominance, recognition, or retaliation, but the warrior notices and redirects. He learns that strength is not in suppressing fear, but in integrating it into awareness. Courage emerges not as a heroic impulse, but as repeated, deliberate engagement with fear, over and over, until instinct aligns with presence. By the first light of dawn, the warrior senses the subtle transformation. Fear is no longer an external enemy or a shadow to flee. It has become an instrument, a signal guiding attention, sharpening perception, and strengthening resolve. Pain and doubt, once adversaries, are now teachers. Through deliberate engagement, the warrior begins to understand that mastery is forged not in comfort, but in facing what the mind resists most fiercely. Transition toward Part 2. The crucible continues, testing not only the body, but the alignment of mind and spirit. The warrior will face ever more demanding trials, each designed to push fear into clarity and reveal the first stirrings of unshakable presence. The forest trial stretches into the second night. Exhaustion presses against the warrior's body, muscles trembling, joints aching, yet the mind must remain unbroken. Darkness becomes a mirror, reflecting not the external world, but internal turbulence, doubt, hesitation, and the lingering grip of ego. The mentor observes from the shadows, allowing the warrior to navigate the crucible alone, intervening only when absolute precision or awareness is required. Every misstep illuminates a weakness. Every moment of clarity reinforces mastery. Combat trials intensify. Opponents are relentless, attacking with speed and strategy beyond the warrior's previous experience. The body responds with trained reflexes, yet it is the mind that dictates victory. Here, fear tests not physical limits, but judgment under pressure. Heart pounds, breath shortens, adrenaline spikes. But the warrior has learned to observe rather than react. Each strike is intentional, each movement a conscious dialogue between presence and instinct. Pain arrives, but is no longer debilitating. It signals where attention is needed. Isolation amplifies the challenge. For hours, the warrior remains on watch, senses straining, muscles coiled, mind alert to every whisper of wind, every crack of twig, every subtle shift in shadows. Fear seeks to fracture attention, conjuring imagined threats and amplifying uncertainty. Yet repetition, silence, and disciplined observation now function as armor. The Musashi System reveals its essence. Mastery is cultivated in these moments where the mind refuses surrender, where courage is enacted through continuous awareness rather than impulse. By the third night, the warrior begins to embody a subtle but profound transformation. Fear, once commanding, now instructs. Every indication of danger, every pang of uncertainty becomes data to refine movement, decision, and presence. Courage emerges as a practiced response, instinctive yet fully conscious. Doubt and discomfort, once paralyzing, are incorporated into awareness, each a step toward integrated strength. Presence becomes a constant, flowing through every breath, strike, and stance. As dawn breaks, the mentor finally speaks, voice carrying across the misted forest. You have faced fear without fleeing. You have allowed it to instruct rather than dominate. This is the essence of courage, deliberate engagement, disciplined attention, and presence under pressure. The path ahead will demand the same rigor, now applied not to fear alone, but to the structure of your life, your practice, and your mastery of self. Transition to Chapter 4. With fear now understood as a teacher rather than an adversary, the warrior is ready to embrace the relentless, transformative regimen of the Musashi System, where discipline becomes invisible, strength and mastery begins to manifest in all actions. The morning mist clings to the dojo like a veil, and the warrior rises before sunrise, muscles sore yet mind alert. The mentor awaits silently, eyes calm, presence commanding. No words are necessary. The day ahead will test the limits of body, mind, and spirit. This is the realm where the Musashi system reveals its true rigor: relentless repetition, strict routines, and unyielding attention to every motion. Fatigue will come, monotony will tempt the mind, and the ego will whisper to abandon the path. But each trial is a stone in the foundation of mastery. The warrior begins with the basics: footwork, strikes, defensive forms. Every movement must be executed with precision, every gesture aligned with intent. Misalignment is immediately apparent. Errors are magnified by repetition. Each hour stretches like a test of patience and endurance. The body protests, but the mind must override instinctive desire for comfort. Discipline, the mentor teaches, is not a burden. It is a tool that structures freedom. Strength arises not from resistance alone, but from surrender to the process. Meditation punctuates the physical rigor. Sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, the warrior confronts the ebb and flow of thought, the whispers of ego, and the subtle signals of fear that linger beneath conscious awareness. The Musashi system insists that mental endurance is as vital as physical precision. In silence, he learns to observe impulses without succumbing to them. Patience grows in the crucible of monotony. Presence sharpens with each deliberate breath. Even as fatigue gnaws, awareness remains intact, reinforcing the foundation upon which mastery is built. Hours merge into relentless cycles of motion and stillness. The mentor circulates silently, correcting subtle deviations. A hand too high, a shoulder too tense, a stance slightly off balance. Each correction is an invitation to refine, to perfect, to internalize the invisible principles underlying every movement. Discipline becomes more than structure. It becomes internalized rhythm. Presence is no longer sporadic. It is woven into every motion, breath, and thought. The warrior begins to sense a transformation. Weakness is challenged, ego tempered, and fear becomes a guide rather than a tyrant. Ego still surfaces, subtle yet persistent. It urges speed, display, recognition, and pride. The warrior intercepts these impulses, redirecting energy into deliberate execution. Each act of self-control reinforces presence. Each deliberate motion strengthens discipline. Pain and monotony, once resisted, are now embraced as instruments, shaping endurance, refining focus, and clarifying intent. In this space, mastery is revealed as integration, the seamless alignment of mind, body, and spirit, forged not in comfort, but in the persistent crucible of disciplined action. By the day's end, a subtle but undeniable shift occurs. Movements flow with efficiency, thought aligns with breath, and awareness permeates every action. Discipline has begun to internalize, no longer external structure, but invisible strength. Fear has receded. The warrior senses its cues without being dominated. The Musashi system demonstrates that mastery emerges not in a moment of triumph, but in the patient accumulation of deliberate, sustained, and focused effort. Transition toward Part 2. The warrior has begun to shoulder the weight of discipline, yet the true depth of endurance, alignment, and mastery awaits in the next cycle of relentless practice, where fatigue and monotony will shape him into an unshakable force. Night falls, but the dojo is alive with quiet intensity. The warrior continues the cycle of strikes, forms, and meditation, each repetition refining precision and presence. Muscles ache, joints throb, and sweat drips steadily, yet fatigue no longer dominates. Awareness holds it in check. The Musashi system has taught him to observe discomfort as feedback, to use it to sharpen focus rather than succumb to it. Every movement now carries intention. Every breath reinforces alignment. The mentor moves among him silently, correcting the smallest deviations. A hand slightly raised, a stance fractionally off-center. Each adjustment is absorbed with patience, each correction internalized. The warrior begins to feel the invisible architecture of mastery forming. Discipline is no longer external imposition, but internalized rhythm. Presence becomes automatic. Every thought, motion, and reaction aligns seamlessly with intent. Strength emerges not in outward display, but in the quiet command of self. Monotony presses hard. Days of repetition could crush the untrained mind, yet the warrior has learned to embrace it. Boredom and fatigue become allies. They reveal cracks in attention, moments of ego intrusion, and gaps in awareness. By focusing on these, the warrior converts discomfort into refinement. Pain is transformed from obstacle into instrument, reinforcing patience, precision, and endurance. The body becomes resilient, the mind sharp, and the spirit steady. By the final hour of training, the warrior senses a profound internal change. Movements flow effortlessly, breath is measured and steady, and attention is unwavering. Discipline has shifted from burden to foundation. Fear has become a signal rather than a master, and ego has been tempered into service. The Musashi System's principle is clear. Enduring strength is built in the silent accumulation of deliberate, precise, and repeated action. External victories may be fleeting, but the mastery of self is eternal. The mentor finally speaks, voice calm and resonant. You have begun to carry the weight of discipline. Each repetition, each deliberate act, each moment of attention builds the fortress of your spirit. Remember, strength is not measured by outward display, but by the alignment of mind, body, and purpose. The path ahead demands more. The mirror of ego awaits, and only by confronting it can your transformation be complete. Transition to Chapter 5. Having internalized discipline and harnessed endurance, the warrior is now prepared to confront ego directly, the final barrier between skill and true mastery. The dojo is quiet at first light, the air dense with anticipation. The warrior stands, his body steady, but a subtle tension betrays the remnants of pride, attachment, and desire for recognition. The mentor approaches, voice calm, eyes sharp. Today, you face the reflection you have long avoided, the ego that distorts perception, corrupts action, and masquerades as strength. Confront it, or it will continue to undermine every lesson you have endured. The warrior grips his practice sword, recognizing that this is no ordinary trial. Ego manifests in countless ways: the impulse to dominate, the craving for approval, the quiet whisper of self-importance. In sparring with the mentor, each misstep, hesitation, or overreach becomes a mirror, revealing pride or attachment he had not fully acknowledged. Movements that once flowed now falter under scrutiny, and he feels the sting of humiliation and frustration, a sensation both unfamiliar and essential. Reflection accompanies physical trial. Sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, the warrior confronts thoughts that rise unbidden: envy, judgment, self-doubt, and the compulsion to compare. These mental patterns, once hidden in the noise of activity, now stand stark and unavoidable. The Musashi System emphasizes that victories over others are meaningless without mastery over the self. Only by dismantling ego can true presence and strength emerge. Through repeated sparring and meditation, he begins to integrate lessons from previous trials. Silence, repetition, and confrontation with fear have sharpened body and mind. But ego had remained subtle, a hidden impediment. Now, each failure is a teacher. Pride is observed, attachment acknowledged, and desire redirected into presence. The warrior discovers that restraint is as powerful as action, humility as vital as strength. Mastery begins to emerge, not in domination, but in clarity and awareness. The mentor guides the warrior through exercises designed to amplify reflection. Every movement, every response, every thought is magnified. Misaligned strikes or overconfident gestures reveal hidden attachments. Each failure is not a setback, but a tool to refine perception. Ego, once unexamined, now becomes visible, a shadow to be understood and integrated rather than denied or crushed. By midday, the warrior experiences moments of stillness within the storm of self-examination. Movements regain fluidity, but now they are rooted in presence and insight, rather than pride or reaction. The mirror has begun to reveal truth. Mastery is less about force than about alignment, less about assertion than about awareness. Strength is not in domination, but in clarity. Courage is not in impulsive action, but in measured, present engagement with reality. Transition toward Part 2. The warrior has begun to confront ego, but the work is incomplete. Only through deeper integration of discipline, silence, and fear into conscious, instinctive action can the reflection become a servant rather than a master. Afternoon descends, and the warrior resumes sparring and meditation, each session now focused on the subtle currents of ego within. Pride still flares in moments of success. Attachment surfaces in moments of challenge. Yet the warrior has learned to observe rather than react. The Musashi System teaches that awareness alone is not enough. Integration is required. Each thought, movement, and breath must be aligned with presence, purpose, and humility. A pivotal moment arrives. A sparring match with the mentor escalates beyond the warrior's expectations. Despite flawless technique, a misstep exposes his impatience and pride. Humiliation is immediate and sharp. Heart pounds, ego protests, yet he does not retreat. Instead, he breathes, observes, and recalibrates. The failure, raw and unvarnished, strips away illusions and exposes the space where mastery must grow. Strength emerges not from triumph, but from the disciplined absorption of truth. Reflection follows. Sitting in silence, the warrior examines the emotions coursing through him: frustration, shame, desire for recognition. Each feeling is acknowledged, studied, and released. He understands that victories over others are temporary. Mastery over self is enduring. Ego becomes a tool, not a tyrant. Fear, once externalized as enemy, now guides attention and alerts him to misalignment. Discipline, long ingrained through repetition and monotony, provides the structure in which this integration is possible. Through repeated cycles of observation, adjustment, and action, the warrior begins to embody the lessons of the Musashi System fully. Presence becomes instinctive. Every movement, breath, and thought flows from alignment rather than desire. Ego no longer directs action, it serves. Fear no longer paralyzes, it instructs. Discipline no longer burdens, it empowers. The warrior feels the first taste of holistic mastery, where body, mind, and spirit function as one, a seamless expression of deliberate action and conscious awareness. As evening settles, the mentor speaks, voice calm yet commanding. You have faced the reflection and seen what was hidden. Ego is no longer your master, but your servant. Fear is no longer your enemy, but your guide. Discipline and presence now form the foundation of action. True mastery is integration, the alignment of self in motion, thought, and spirit. Transition to Chapter 6. The warrior, having dismantled ego and integrated lessons of silence, fear, and discipline, is now prepared for the ultimate test, a culminating challenge that will reveal whether mastery has truly been realized. Dawn creeps over the mountains, painting the dojo in golden shadow. The warrior stands alone on the polished floor, the morning mist curling around his feet. Months of discipline, silence, and confrontation with fear and ego have shaped him. But today, he faces the ultimate test, the culmination of the Musashi System, where mind, body, and spirit are assessed in perfect alignment. The mentor watches from the side, expression calm, presence commanding, yet wordless. The trial begins with observation. Every gesture, every breath, every stance is scrutinized, not by others, but by the warrior himself. Awareness is complete, attention absolute. He moves with precision, not as an exhibition of strength, but as an embodiment of presence. The Musashi System emphasizes that mastery is not measured in speed or power, but in alignment, composure, and instinctive action. Every motion flows naturally from intention, discipline, and understanding. Combat follows, a ceremonial duel designed not to dominate, but to reveal mastery. The opponent is skilled, formidable, and unpredictable, forcing the warrior to respond with instinct tempered by awareness. Ego whispers for display, for aggression, for control, but he intercepts it, allowing presence to dictate action. Fear surfaces, but it no longer dictates, it informs. Each strike, block, and movement is deliberate, integrated, and fluid, a symphony of body and mind moving as one. The duel pushes him to the limits of endurance and focus. Muscles scream, breath quickens, yet mind and spirit remain steady. The Musashi System has prepared him for this. Fatigue, monotony, and adversity have been transformed into tools for precision and clarity. Each action reflects the culmination of months of repetition, meditation, and self-confrontation. The warrior is no longer reacting. He is present, anticipating, integrating fear, discipline, and humility into instinctive mastery. Through the trial, a profound realization emerges. Mastery is not a moment of victory, nor a declaration of superiority. It is the seamless integration of discipline, presence, courage, and clarity. Every failure along the path, fear faced, ego confronted, exhaustion endured, has been a step toward this embodiment. Strength is now internalized, flowing through every motion, thought, and breath without effort or hesitation. Transition toward Part 2. The culmination is near, where the duel and challenge will conclude, revealing the true measure of mastery and the warrior's transformation into a disciplined, present, and fearless spirit. The duel reaches its climax. Movements blur yet remain precise, each strike a deliberate statement of presence, each defense a reflection of awareness. The warrior's mind is quiet, fully engaged, and instinctive. Fear is acknowledged but does not interfere. Ego is silent, having served its purpose as a guide rather than a master. Discipline, cultivated through months of repetition, monotony, and confrontation, now manifests effortlessly, flowing through body, breath, and thought. The opponent strikes with skill and unpredictability, Yet the warrior responds with a calm composure that seems almost preternatural. Every block, every parry, every counter is an integration of lessons learned: silence, endurance, observation, and presence. No motion is wasted. No thought is wasted. The Musashi System's essence is alive in him. Strength is invisible, yet undeniable, arising from alignment rather than brute force. As the duel concludes, there is no shout, no display of triumph, only the quiet acknowledgement of mastery. The opponent bows, respect in their eyes, and the mentor steps forward, expression calm yet satisfied. "You have walked the path few endure," he says. "Weakness has been broken, fear has been faced, ego has been integrated. Discipline, presence, and courage have shaped you. Remember, mastery is not a destination, it is a lifelong path. Today, you embody it." The warrior stands alone at dawn, the morning light warming his face. He steps outside, each footfall deliberate, each breath measured, aware of every sensation yet undistracted by it. He feels the culmination of months of unyielding practice, internalization of discipline, and integration of self. Strength flows through him silently, a quiet power born of relentless commitment. Fear is no longer an adversary, ego no longer a tyrant, and discipline is no longer a burden but a guiding force. He walks into the misty forest beyond the dojo, a figure of calm authority and presence. Every movement, every thought, every breath embodies mastery. The Musashi System has done more than teach skill. It has transformed spirit, aligning body, mind, and purpose in a seamless whole. The warrior now carries a strength that transcends challenge, a clarity that defies distraction, and a calm that nothing can disturb.